So in this segment, we're going to be talking about foreign media dunking on the UK for our Brexit-fueled madness. US and European media give their verdict on the fuel and food and labour crises. They say that it's caused by Brexit. So this is a lot of foreign media dunking on us, particularly the Europeans, but also the Yanks as well. So when you get it from both sides like that, it's not great, is it? So let's have a look. Government ministers may insist it is wrong to blame Brexit for Britain's fuel, food, and labour shortages. It's down to the pandemic, but why is it not affecting the rest of Europe? I don't know, because we're levelling up and they're staying on their level maybe. But for the rest of Europe and beyond, there is only one reason why the UK's crisis is so much worse than everyone else's. Obviously, the B word. One is tempted to tell the British. You have only yourselves to blame, said Gabby. My pronunciations here are going to be really bad. Gabby on ARD's Tagesthemen, a leading German news show. We tried to talk you out of it, but you decided otherwise. Now you have to face the consequences, which is very fairly polite, to be fair, which is, well done. You chose to do this. Live with it. Fairly straightforward. Der Spiegel saying the UK... The only time I've heard of Der Spiegel is in sports, so it's quite interesting. Normally it's in sports. Der Spiegel agreed, saying the UK had left the EU to regain control, but now, when the promised post-pandemic economy upswing should be beginning, seem to be experiencing the exact opposite, an unprecedented loss of control. Let's not forget here that we are unilaterally doing cabotage for EU drivers, which gives them a competitive edge in the UK, but also we are not doing checks on our side of goods coming into the EU. So, again, we have lost control here. So yeah, it's hard to argue with Der Spiegel or the right for Der Spiegel in this one. Perhaps the sharpest outside view of Britain came in the New Yorker cartoon. The shortages are all British made and British owned. Boris Johnson is shown as saying, and that's something we can be incredibly proud of. Now that I've seen that picture, it's quite good, but it is true that the shortages are all British made. We have caused these problems ourselves. We are risking potentially more energy problems if we keep annoying France, who we're very reliant on. Can't imagine them shutting off the lights, but we have put ourselves in a situation where France can do that, or France can start upping prices. It's really up to them. They have a lot of leverage in this situation, but we have put ourselves in a weakened position, not to forget the fact that we are out of the EU's internal market energy thing, which means that it helps the EU regulate more prices as they are a bigger buyer of energy, of gas, electricity, etc. from the sources. So that gives them a lot of buying power because you have economies to scale. When you buy in bulk, you can buy cheaper, and so the EU could buy things like gas way cheaper than we can, and far more reliably because they're a far bigger market than we are, if people haven't realised that yet. Britain was suffering more than most from global supply chain problems, and that's the key, that the planet is facing problems. People, other countries are facing problems with shipping containers, etc. But we are facing it far worse than any other country, and that's the thing that needs to be looked at. That's where you can look at Brexit as a key kind of thing that's exacerbated the problems and hampered our recovery. Because EU workers had left and strict Brexit immigration rules meant no one could come in, Der Spiegel said, creating labour shortages everywhere where the work is hard, dirty and poorly paid. And yes, you can push for workers to get better working conditions and pay, but that's something the government have always had the ability to do. When you look at the Scandinavian countries, they can make it so that the jobs that are poorly paid aren't so poorly paid, because they can regulate how much. That in Scandinavian countries, I don't think they have a minimum wage, but they have strong unions who can fight for workers. We have a low minimum wage in the UK and we don't have strong unions. That's a key problem. And so there's no one fighting for poorer people. The only reason now certain people in certain industries are getting pay rises is because they are key to how things like supermarkets and other businesses work, and therefore have to be paid more. But even that's not enough. We still need foreign people to come in to do that work because we don't have the expertise in the UK, and we haven't created a system which fosters those expertise within the country. That's another problem where it will take decades to sort that out through Brexit, because you don't just have to train people, you have to change the culture around those jobs as well. People in the UK don't want to become HGV drivers because it is long hours, because you're not going to be able to see your family. It is lower paid considering what they do. It's very hard to change the culture around that and the mentality around certain jobs. Working in meat processing, incredibly hard job, incredibly low pay. Why would you want to do that? and so we've relied on EU workers and workers from outside the EU to do those jobs. The government can't change the hard bit. Those jobs will always be difficult, but they could always change the poorly paid bit. But they chose not to. They chose laissez-faire economics, and this is what they got. Economically isolated, the country faces an autumn of discontent, for which Brexit is not only the only reason, but a key one, which is true. It said the government, however, insists none of this has to do with anything with leaving the EU, sticking defiantly to its Brexit success story, even if the statements are getting more and more bizarre. We're seeing rampant inflation flow in the country. That's a big problem, and the government are reversing some of the things that it did via Brexit, and it makes you think, if none of these problems are related to Brexit, why are you implementing more visas for HGV drivers and for butchers? If they're not Brexit related, surely you don't have to reverse the cuts you've done. If getting rid of cabotage wasn't such a big problem, why are you re-implementing it then over the next few weeks? Let's be real here now. If they're not Brexit related, you would not be doing Brexit related changes, would you? ARD's Custorts concurred. Oddly, she said, for the British government, Brexit is not just among the possible causes, it's don't mention the B word. For ministers and for so much of the media, responsibility lies elsewhere, but with themselves, which is true. The government keeps saying it's industry's fault. Industry keeps saying it's the government's fault. It is the government's fault for the most part, but these industries have been run very poorly and have now had to kind of reap what they've sowed when it comes to poor working conditions. But the government always had the ability to change these things. The government always had the ability to implement minimum wages. They could even done so in certain sectors if they really wanted to, but they chose not to. And so the government are saying it's industry's fault, industry is saying it's the government's fault, and you have a system where no one will get anything done because industry are hampered by the amount of people they can get, and the government decides how many people can come in from abroad. Again, it's the government as always. This is some big German word here. Süddeutsche Zeitung, that's really bad, who also agreed the most evidence shortage of 100,000 HGV drivers was not solely a consequence of Brexit, which is true. Around 25,000 EU drivers left, causing that 100,000 shortage. But that's 25,000 more drivers we could have had we not done Brexit. And also, you got rid of cabotage, which has further made the problems worse. Poland has a HGV driver shortage. It's bad. But because of things like cabotage, they can keep things on the shelves a lot easier than we can. You keep the lorries moving with stuff in them, and the lorry drivers keep making money. And that enables the system to keep going to an extent. But by introducing a short-term visa scheme for foreign drivers, it said the government had basically admitted that exiting the EU was a decisive factor in the supply crisis, which is true. By extending the visas, you have said it's a problem because the government have said, we'll level up and train our own drivers. Where are they then? I don't see them anywhere. Moreover, it would never work. Why would a Romanian or Bulgarian truck driver come to the UK? They're also wanted in Germany, Belgium and elsewhere. The paper asked, describing the expectation that cheap labour from Eastern Europe will save Christmas at the push of a button and then disappear again as shameful, which is true. Initially they asked people to be gone by Christmas. They're not going to have a visa. They can't work after Christmas. That's a joke. No one's going to want to take that. You stupid. Even if the pay is slightly higher than working in Germany or Belgium. Those countries have better truck stops than we do. Their drivers are treated better than ours are. So even if the pay is less, why would you want to risk your living conditions or working conditions, really, in that case? It's just ridiculous. Plus the fact that we've spoken before how the UK are doing exit declarations. That's going to be a problem for drivers. The UK are saying we're not going to take EU ID cards, you have to come with a passport. How many EU drivers have passports and how many want to keep those around with them? It's just this is madness. Johnson's bet, the paper said, was that Brexit would show Britain was in control of its borders and that wages would rise. I mean, to a very small extent that has happened, but not on the whole. But if Britons cannot fill up their cars or roast a Christmas turkey, he will have to find an answer to the question of why were there no shortages in France or Germany, and he'd have to answer the question, why are we importing so many more turkeys from the EU than we did in previous years, despite the fact that we had a pretty successful turkey growing thing in the UK. We had enough turkeys, I believe, in the UK during Christmas before Brexit. Now we don't have enough abattoirs to deal with the amount of turkeys. Obviously, this is the cartoon here. The shortages are all British made and British owned, and that's something we can be incredibly proud of. It's great drawing, to be honest. And so these questions the government needs to really answer here, like why is it that we're going to have to be importing more food from the EU, which makes a potential trade war even more disastrous? This is crazy. I keep using that phrase, but it is. This whole thing doesn't make any sense. But there's a lot more to talk about here, and this video will go on for a while. It would be very wrong. The New York Times also insisted to blame a global crisis solely on Brexit, but it said there were Brexit-specific causes that are indisputable. That this was not, it added the first trade disruption to hit Britain since it left the single market. Remember the shellfish producers who can't sell shellfish within the EU unless they're from grade A waters. And now we find that there's a lot more, there aren't as many chemicals in the water to clean the water compared to before. Now there are more pollutants in the water. So that's going to mean more grade B fish, which means it's going to be even less that we can sell into the EU because we don't have the purification facilities in the UK to purify the fish before they are sold. And also the fact that once you purify the fish, they have a very short shelf life, hence why they were processed within the EU, because then you could process them in Spain or France or wherever and take them to the restaurants or to the fish markets very quickly. You can't do that now because of the export checks that we have had imposed on us because we chose to be a third country. Britain is the country that helped push these third country rules. Now we've fallen foul of them. How ironic is that? But it was the first post-Brexit crisis that had not been masked by the effects of the coronavirus. Very true. Very true. No one could deny the shellfish issue was down to COVID. It was very much down to Brexit. Also, the fishing problems, the export of fish and beef and other things was massively caused by Brexit. The problems, all the paperwork that was needed, the fact that these exporters are struggling so much, all caused by Brexit. Significantly, it was also geographically selective, with no reports of panic buying in Northern Ireland. Another huge problem there, that Brexiteers can't answer why Northern Ireland is doing so much better than us, which also has an open border with an EU member state. Ireland slowly becoming the new land bridge for goods going into the EU and also going into the UK. Nonetheless, the Brexiteers invariably find other culprits for bad news, the paper said, and much of the UK media are far more concerned by the government's competence in dealing with the crisis than the structural hurdles imposed by Britain's new status, which is true. We keep talking about how, we're going to have more HGV drivers come in because the new visas and stuff like that, rather than looking at the fact that, well, why do we need these visas? Why aren't we training enough HGV drivers? What are the conditions these drivers need to live in? Why don't people want to take up these jobs, despite the fact that there are pay increases on offer, and there are companies offering to help pay for the training? These are the structural problems that people really need to look at. So this is great stuff here. CNN, who actually do great international work but really poor domestic work, their analysis was also that Britain was suffering more than most countries because of Brexit, or specifically the form of Brexit pursued by the UK government. We could have been like the EFTA countries. We could have been like a Norway, for example, which still does checks, but those checks are not as aggressive as the ones that are done on the UK now, because Norway aren't a third country. We are. Which introduced stringent immigration policies, which is again something self-inflicted, and took Britain out of the EU market for goods. They talked about an Australian points-based system, but the whole point of that is to say, look, we don't have, say, a lot of lorry drivers. We're going to lower the points incredibly for lorry drivers, or for abattoirs and for butchers and things like that. But we haven't done that. We're just like, oh my God, there's a crisis. No, there's not. That's what the government say. And then after about a few weeks or a month, they're like, okay, now we're going to do something. It's like, it's a bit late, pal. Immigration isn't a tap you can turn on and off. It doesn't work like that. There aren't people desperate to come to this country. Not really. Making it much harder for British companies to hire EU workers and much more costly for them to do business with the EU's single biggest trading partner, that is the EU. It did not have to be this way, CNN said. Worker shortages, for example, were not an inevitable outcome of Brexit, but the UK's post-Brexit immigration system was designed to reduce the numbers of unskilled workers coming to Britain, because they thought that we would get British people to do those jobs. Well, where are they then? Unfortunately, over 4 decades of EU membership, many sectors had become to rely on a steady inflow of labour, which people can argue has decreased wages. But again, who controls the amount wages are paid within the country? On the whole, it's the government. They set the minimum wage, which sets the tone for a lot of the other industries. Spain's El Paz highlighted the absurdity of the government's reluctance to accept that Brexit had anything to do with the fuel crisis, while simultaneously offering temporary visas to the very workers Brexit prevents from returning, which again is another point that's very well made by the paper. That is, how can you say it's not related to Brexit, but also reverse one of your Brexit immigration policies? It doesn't make sense. Dutch newspaper De Volkskrant, I'm going to say, said that for many, the whole Surrey situation showed the madness of stepping out of the single market with its free movement of goods and people, which is something Britain became very reliant on. Not to mention services, which we made a lot of money from, but that's all going now. In France, Le Monde blamed a recent sharp deterioration in Anglo-French relations over fishing rights and the AUKUS Security Pact squarely on the British government's fast-growing, self-inflicted and largely Brexit-induced problems, which is true. We're seeing Anglo-French relations really deteriorate over fishing, and also over the Northern Ireland Protocol as well, which is, again, two things inflicted by the UK. I don't know where that ends with kind of French relations. We've always had a weird relationship with France as rivals, but I feel like that kind of, as we were EU members, that kind of simmered down a bit, but that's very much on the boil now. We don't know how, Emmanuel Macron's got an election coming up as well, so he's very much in a saber-rattling mood with the UK. He's got an election to win. He has to appear tough on these things. To conceal his own difficulties, the British Prime Minister is multiplying his attacks on Paris as part of an attempt to justify the UK's divorce from the EU and underline its alleged benefits. The paper said, we benefited massively from being an EU member, and now we can see a lot of the problems from leaving the EU. The paper said, and he's not short of domestic problems. We have a lot of domestic problems, like we've spoken about before: energy, staff shortages, services leaving, record amounts of vacancies going without people to fill them. Boris Johnson has a lot to do, and he's spending his time saber-rattling over the Northern Ireland Protocol, a thing which he helped to design. He was the one that came up with the idea, or at least Frost was. Negotiated, said it was a great deal, and now suddenly it's terrible and the worst thing ever. Like, come on, mate. Due mainly to the nationalist retreat of Brexit, which denies visas to EU workers, the shortage of truck drivers is hitting the supply of petrol stations and supermarkets, it said. The Prime Minister, trapped by isolation Britain, voted for... The PM, trapped by the isolation Britain voted for in 2016, but which he has exacerbated by his chaotic short-termism. Let's not forget here, people like Daniel Hannan were saying absolutely nobody's threatening our place in the single market. Boris Johnson has. He's taken us out of it. So again, we didn't vote to be mega isolationist in 2016, but Boris Johnson has made that happen. And he's looking for scapegoats. Liberation agreed hundreds of thousands of drivers, farmhands, waiters, plumbers, even doctors working in Britain on EU passports have left with no intention of returning. It said in an editorial, the shortages are getting worse week by week. Yes, they are. So should France accede, is that the word? To Johnson's request early in the month to donnez-moi un brick, or go boil an egg, Boris? Liberation replied, a French expression meaning leave me alone, at least if you can find any eggs in the local supermarkets. The egg shortages haven't been that bad, to be fair, not anymore. But a point being is that essentially the UK has been dunked on by multiple different foreign outlets in the EU and in the US because of the self-inflicted wounds we've decided to impose on ourselves. And what more can you say apart from they're right? Brexit isn't the only problem the UK is facing, but it's exacerbated a lot of the other problems that we have, and has put us in a much more weakened position where we're relying on, neighbours that we've really annoyed. The French, being the key example of that. We're very reliant on the French for energy, and we've continuously annoyed them through, our saber-rattling over the Northern Ireland Protocol, but also, French fishermen rights in and around Guernsey. We've also really frustrated them over that over the last year. So do France want to do us any favours? Not really. Macron's got an election coming up. He has to appear strong, and if he doesn't, then it's going to cost him potentially in the elections. He does not want to look like he wants to get bullied by the UK. And truth be told, he has to do something. The EU have to do something here because ultimately the foreign media can all see it. The UK is in a very weak position right now, and we're the ones acting like we're prime Mike Tyson. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.